Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel AWS DevOps Niche 11. So in this video, we are going to go through the examination guide for the AWS Certified Solution Architect Associate exam. And this exam code is SAA-C03. And apart from that, I'm also going to review some 10 practice exam questions for one of the domains within the exam, which is design secured architectures. So I'm going to make this video into 4 parts. So in the first part, that is today's video, we will go through the examination guide for the architect certification exam. And then I will also review some 10 questions for the domain design secure architectures. So let us go ahead. So what would be the agenda for the today's video? So let us go ahead and review the architect exam guide. I will go ahead and review the exam questions for the first domain, design secure architectures. So this video is typically intended for people who are currently preparing for the AWS Certified Solution Architect certification exam and who wants to take up the certification. So let me start with the examination guide. So if you see here, this is the latest version of the architect certification exam, which is SAA-C03. So the previous version of the exam was SAA-C02, but this is the updated version which has been effective since 2022. And as part of this SAA-C03 exam, AWS have added good number of services as part of the examination scope. Okay. And basically, this exam validates a candidate's ability to design solutions that incorporate AWS services to meet the customer requirements and design architectures that are resilient, secure, high-performing, and cost-optimized, right? So that is a primary role of any solution architect. So he has to understand the customer requirements and he has to come up with a design which is more secure, more available, highly performing, and at the same time, it is cost optimized as well. Okay, so now you see the answers or answer types within this exam, it is going to just comprise of 2 responses. One is a multiple choice based questions where you just need to pick one correct answer, right? Then there will be a multiple response questions where in the question itself, they will mention you how many are the correct answers. So they will say, pick 2 correct answers or pick 3 correct answers. So ideally, the examination is just going to comprise of these 2 response types. One is a multiple choice and one is the multiple response. Okay, and if I go to this AWS website, so you can see here, the overall examination duration is 130 minutes, right? And the exam format, typically this exam contains 65 questions overall, right? And which is including multiple choice and multiple response questions. But out of the 65, only 50 questions are accounted for your scores. So the remaining 15 questions are typically for some survey purpose, but the number of answers that will count for your certification score is just only the 50 responses. Okay, and you see the cost of the certification is $150 US, and you can either register for the exam in the Prometric, the Pearson VUE testing center, or you can also take the exam online as a proctored exam. Okay. Fine. So now, what would be the passing percentage of this exam? So if you see here, the results for the exam are reported as a scaled score of 100 to 1000. So basically, the minimum passing score is 720, which means you need to have 72% of the questions that should be correct, okay, in order to pass the exam. So if I say 50 questions are accounted for the exam, so basically, what would be 70% of 50, 72%. Okay, so you need to have at least 36 questions correct out of 50 in order to pass the certification exam. Okay. Okay, fine. So now we will quickly go through what are all the four major domains from which we can expect questions on the examination. So you can see here, these are the four primary domains. Let me see if there is a table on this document. Okay, so these are the four primary domains. So domain one, we have design secure architectures, where 30% of the exam questions will be part of this domain, design secure architectures, right? And domain two is design resilient architectures. So what do you mean by resiliency? It is the ability of the service to come back to the normal condition as soon as possible, to recover from failures as soon as possible, right? So what are all the services that we can use to achieve this resilience, right? And in the domain one, basically it will talk about most of the security related services within AWS. So resilient architectures, it is contributing to 26% of the overall exam questions. So first is security based services. Second is the resilient services that helps in giving high availability. The third will be the high performing architectures. So how can the architect come up with a high performing architecture by incorporating the service that will offer high performance for your environment, right? So that is contributing to 24% of the overall exam questions. Then finally, the domain four, we have the cost optimized architectures. So how do you achieve cost optimization for your AWS environment? By selecting the right service for the right requirements. So that is going to contribute to 20% of the overall exam questions. So ideally, these are all the four domains from which we can expect the questions for the certification exam, right? So security-based services, services that offer high availability, services that offer high performance, and services that offer a optimum cost, or that provides a optimum cost. Okay, I hope this would have given you some insights about the certification exam. So now what we'll do here is, team, let me go back to my slide and we will straight away start with reviewing the practice exam questions for the domain one, which is design secure architectures. Now, let us go ahead with the first question on designing secure architectures. So here is a question. A solution architect needs to make sure that the on-demand EC2 instance can only be accessed from this IP address via an SSH connection. So which configuration below will satisfy this requirement, right? So that is a question. Okay, so there is an EC2 instance which has to be accessed from only one IP address via an SSH. So this is the set of answers we have. One is a security group inbound rule, the protocol TCP port range 22, and the source we need to define as like this. So this is a CIDR. How do you represent a network, right? So this is one of the options. Now we have security group outbound rule protocol TCP port range is 22. Okay, so if you ask me, I would directly exclude this answer because here we need to set an inbound rule in the security group, not an outbound rule. So wherever you see the option outbound rule, we can safely eliminate the answer. Now the choice is basically restricted to these two now. Okay, security group inbound rule, protocol TCP port range 22, source is this. Security group inbound rule, protocol UDP. So this is one, aspect that will make us eliminate this choice also, right? So because SSH is a TCP protocol, it is not a UDP protocol. Okay, so now we were able to exclude the answers 2, 3, and 4. So which leaves only with the choice number 1. That is the correct answer, right? Okay, so you can see this is the correct answer. We are going to put an inbound rule with the protocol TCP. and the source will be the IP address /32. Basically, /32 is a mask which represents one IP address, right? This is the correct answer. Let's go with our next question. A pharmaceutical company has resources hosted on both their on-premise network as well as in the AWS cloud. They want all of their software architects to access resources on both environments using their on-premises credentials, which is stored in the Active Directory. Okay, so in this scenario, which of the following can be used to fulfill this requirement? Okay, so there is already the set of credentials which is stored in an Active Directory in the on-premise environment. Okay, so how do they use those credentials for accessing the resources in the AWS cloud? So using IAM users is one option. Then we have set up SAML 2.0 based federation by using a Microsoft Active Directory federation service. Then we have Amazon VPC and set up SAML 2.0 federation by using a web identity federation. Right, so we can try to exclude the answers here. So this is not a basically a web identity because they have to use the credentials for all their environments, both within on-premises as well as the cloud. So we can actually exclude this. This is not just specific to the web application, right? And then we have Amazon VPC. So VPC is not going to help in this scenario, or even IAM users. Okay, so this leaves us with this option, using a SAML 2.0 based federation by using a Active Directory federation service. Okay, so whenever you want to integrate the Active Directory, the on-premise Active Directory with the AWS cloud, so we have to use this SAML 2.0 Microsoft Active Directory federation service. SAML is nothing but simple assertion markup language. So this is a service that we need to use in order to do this integration. So this is the correct answer. Okay, so you can see here option 2 is the correct answer. Go on to the next question. Solution architect is hosting a website in the S3 bucket named Tutorials Dojo. The users load the website using the following URL, and there is a new requirement to add a JavaScript on the web pages to make authenticated HTTP GET request against the same bucket by using the Amazon S3 API endpoint. Okay, so upon testing, you notice that the web browser blocks the JavaScript from allowing those requests. So which of the following options is the most suitable solution that you should implement in this scenario? So you can see here, there are two domains that is coming in the picture, right? So this is the main domain and this is another domain. So if at all you want the S3 bucket to accept requests from another domain, what needs to be enabled? So there is a question. These are the options: enable cross-region replication. So this we will have to eliminate because this is to basically replicate the objects between the source and the destination bucket. And enable the cross-zone load balancing. This is also wrong because this is something to do with the load balancers, right? Then we have enabling the cross-origin resource sharing. That is a course configuration in the bucket, right? So basically, yes, this is the option that we need to enable. If at all you want the S3 bucket to accept requests from another domains, or if somebody from a different domain wants to access the object from your S3 bucket, this option has to be enabled, cross-origin resource sharing, right? So this is the correct answer. So enable cross-origin resource sharing configuration in the bucket. Into the next question. A company hosted an e-commerce website on an auto-scaling group of EC2 instances behind an application load balancer. The solution architect noticed that the website is receiving a large number of illegitimate external requests from multiple systems with IP addresses that constantly change, right? So to resolve the performance issues, the solution architect must implement a solution that would block the illegitimate requests with minimal impact on the legitimate traffic. So basically here, this is indicating that there is a DDoS attack that is happening on the environment. So that should give us a clue. So DDoS is the distributed denial of service attacks. So we need to pick a service which helps in mitigating this DDoS. Okay. And they are also saying that they are using an application load balancer for an e-commerce website, right? So now let us try to eliminate the answers and go to the right answer. First is creating a custom rule in the security group of the application load balancer to block the offending requests, right? So this may not be completely helpful in terms of monitoring the source IPs and all. Okay, so this can be excluded. Then there is a second option: create a rate-based rule in the AWS WAF service, which is a web application firewall, and associate a web ACL to an application load balancer. This looks to be a little closer, or maybe this could be a right answer, but we can just review the other answers also. Create a custom network ACL and associate it with the subnet of the application load balancer to block the offending requests. Then create a regular rule in the WAF and associate the web ACL to an application load balancer. Okay, so here or the keyword where they are saying that we need to block the illegitimate requests. Okay, and this is being a e-commerce website that is running behind an application load balancer. So the answer should be definitely involving the WAF service. WAF is a web application firewall. So WAF is a service which helps in mitigating the DDoS attacks happening on the web application. Okay, so basically the answer can be either 2 or 4. Okay, but here the answer 2 says create a rate-based rule in the WAF and associate the web ACL to the application load balancer. And option 4 is talking about a regular rule. So since they are saying that we need to implement a solution that would block the illegitimate request with minimal impact on the legitimate traffic. So because of this hint, we have to go with the answer rate-based rule. So we have to create a rate-based rule in the AWS WAF and associate a web ACL, which the web access control list, to the application load balancer, right? So basically, in that case, the option 2 is the correct answer. Okay, so create a rate-based rule in the AWS WAF and associate the web ACL to an application load balancer. So how do you create this rate-based rule in the WAF? So if I search for WAF, I'm in the WAF dashboard here, so I can actually go into the web ACLs. Okay, so before we create a web ACL, we have to create a rule groups. And if I say just create a rule group, I can give it a name. This is a demo rule group, and click next. So here you can see okay, this is a rule group. I go back. So I will say create a rule group and give it a name. Okay, now I will click add rule. So if I click add rule, there are two categories here. One is a regular rule and the other one is a rate-based rule. So in our question, they say that there should be a minimal impact on the legitimate requests. So in that case, you have to go for a rate-based rule where you can set a condition that only if you are getting illegitimate requests to the count of 50 or to the count of 100, then you block the traffic. So that is the reason we typically have to go for a rate-based rule in this scenario. So limit request rates for requests that match your criteria, applies the action to the matching request when the limit is reached, and removes the action when the rate falls below the limit. So if I am selecting rate-based rule here, I can actually give a condition that if at all, if I say the number as 50, if the traffic from a IP address is reaching, if you are getting requests from that particular IP to the extent of 50, then only you will limit the traffic from that IP address or block the traffic from that IP address. Okay, so for the scenario, whatever we were given, we have to go with selecting a rate-based rule in the WAF. Okay, so now let us go into the next question. So Financial application is composed of an auto-scaling group of EC2 instances, an application load balancer, and there is a MySQL RDS database also, which is implemented in a multi-AC configuration. To protect the confidential data of your customers, you have to ensure that the RDS database can be accessed only using the profile credentials specific to the EC2 instances via an authentication token. So it has to be accessed using the profile credentials specific to your EC2 instances and also via an authentication token. So which is a service here that will help in achieving all this? So we have to use the profile credentials, which is very much specific to the EC2 instances, and there should be an authentication token, right? So the only option which helps in facilitating all these three is option 3, using the IAM DB authentication. Okay, so once you are selecting IAM DB authentication, so we can access the RDS database based on the role, whatever is assigned to the EC2 instances and via the authentication token, right? So this is the correct answer. So enable the IAM DB authentication. Now let's go to the next question. A government entity is conducting a population and housing census in the city. Each household information uploaded on their online portal is stored in the encrypted files in S3. The government assigns its solution architect to set compliance policies that verify data containing personally identifiable information. This is a keyword here, right? PII, in a manner that meets their compliance standards. They should also be alerted if there are potential policy violations in the privacy of their S3 buckets. Okay. So now this the main keyword is PII. So there should be a service. So which of the following should the architect implement to satisfy the requirement? What is a service which monitors the PII in the S3 bucket? So we have some set of options here. One is set up and configure Amazon Poly to scan for usage patterns on the S3 data. So this is wrong because Amazon Poly is totally used for a different purpose. Then we also have set up and configure a fraud detector to send out alert notifications whenever a security violation is detected. So this is more to do with some security frauds that is happening within the environment. So this is also not related. So set up and configure Macy to monitor their Amazon S3 data. So we'll come to this option. So set up and configure Amazon Kendra to monitor malicious activity on their Amazon S3 data. So Kendra is a service that also is having a different use case. So we can exclude the answers 1, 2, and 4. So typically we are left with choice 3, which is Macy. So what is a service that will help in monitoring the PII information on a S3 bucket? It is Amazon Macy. Okay, so we have to use the Macy service for this requirement here. So that is why choice C is the correct answer. Set up and configure Macy to monitor their Amazon S3 data. So even if I search for Macy in the AWS console, so you can see here, Amazon Macy classifies and secures your business critical content. So the business critical content, they are pointing to the PII data, the personally identifiable information. Okay. So you can see here, Macy is a data security service that discovers sensitive data using machine learning and pattern matching. In this case, it is going to discover the PII data that is stored in the S3 bucket. Okay. So let's go through this question. A company runs its website on EC2 instances behind an application load balancer, which is also configured as the origin for the CloudFront distribution. The company wants to protect against the cross-site scripting and SQL injection attacks. So whenever you see this keyword, cross-site scripting and SQL injection, so basically, again, it is also pointing to the DDoS attacks. And typically, we need to narrow down to the answer where we have WAF, right? The web application firewall. Already we saw a question on the WAF. So here also we have to pick an answer which is having WAF. Okay? So you can see enable shield advanced. This is a more advanced service to prevent the DDoS attacks. Here they are talking mainly about the cross-site scripting and SQL injection attacks, and typically on the web layer. They mentioned the website as well, right? So we can eliminate all the answers that is containing shield, and firewall manager is more to do with monitoring the security bottlenecks inside a network. So that leaves us with answer 4, which is the correct answer. So set up WAF on the CloudFront distribution because they're using a CloudFront as the origin, and use basically application load balancer is configured as the origin in the CloudFront distribution. So we have to set up a WAF on the CloudFront distribution and use conditions and rules that block the cross-site scripting and SQL injection attack. So D is the correct answer. Okay, so now let's quickly go to the next question. A company has a strict data protection requirements. A solution architect must configure security for a VPC to ensure that backend Amazon RDS cannot be accessed from the internet, right? So this is one of the condition where the RDS DB instances cannot be accessed from the internet. The solution architect must ensure that the DB instances are accessible from the application tier over a specified port, right? So the DB instance should be accessed only by an application server, right, which would be residing inside a private subnet within a VPC. How can we achieve this? Okay, so one is specify a DB subnet group that contains only private subnets for the DB instances. Yes, this answer makes much sense. Why? Because generally, the DB should be accessible by the application server residing in a private subnet. So whenever you are configuring the RDS, we have to specify a subnet group which is pointing to the private subnet. Okay, so this is one correct answer. Then Elastic associating an Elastic network interface with a private IP address to each EDB instance. This may not help here. Configuring the shield with a VPC. No, I think we'll have to eliminate all these answers. And configuring a direct connection on the database. So having a direct connect is not really going to help with application server accessing the database, right? So direct connect is more a direct network link from the on-prem data center to AWS. Okay, so how about this question? This answer: add an inbound rule to the database security group that allows requests from the security group of the applications tier over the database. Yes, this is very important. One is we specify a DB subnet group pointing to the private subnet. Other thing is, for the RDS, we have to definitely allow connection requests coming from the application server, and that has to be done via the security group. You need to add an inbound rule to the database security group allowing requests from the application here, right? So in that case, option A and E, they are the correct answers. Okay, so next question. A company is developing a new mobile version of its popular web application in the AWS cloud. The mobile app must be accessible to internal and external users. The mobile app must also handle authorization, authentication, and user management from one central source. So which is a service that will help in providing an authentication and authorization service for the applications? So we need to select that service here. So IAM roles, no, IAM roles are typically, used to uh, have the EC2 instances perform any specific function or a specific role or a specific action, right? So IAM roles, it's not the correct answer. Similarly, IAM users and groups, no. Then AWS security token service that will help in generating tokens for the time being. But if at all you want to have a service which has to handle authorization, authentication, and user management from one centralized source, then the service that does is Cognito user pools. So you have to create a Cognito user pool and you'll have to link this user pool with your application. So that way your application will use Cognito as its source for authentication, user management, as well as the authorization. Okay, so Cognito is the right answer here. Okay, so let's see. I think there is one more question. So let's go through this question. A company is investigating services to manage vulnerability scans in the EC2 instances and container images that the company stores in the ECR. The service should identify potential software vulnerabilities and categorize the severity of the vulnerabilities, right? So which is a service in AWS which will identify the software vulnerabilities and able to categorize the vulnerabilities. That is the service we need to pick it here. So what are the options? We have guard duty, we have patch manager, we have inspector, and we have AWS config. Okay. So guard duty is basically a service used to monitor some security violations or security bottlenecks. Patch manager typically used for patching. And Amazon inspector, seems to be the correct answer here. But we have config. Again, config is a service used for tracking the history of each and every resource that you are configured within your AWS environment, right? So this is basically a CMDB service. So now, which is a service that does the vulnerability scanning? It is nothing but Amazon Inspector. Inspector is a service that is used to perform vulnerability scans in your EC2 instances and also categorize the severity of the vulnerabilities. Okay? So Inspector, Amazon Inspector is the right answer. So I can also search for inspector, the console here. You can see here, continual vulnerability management at scale. So whenever you see the keyword vulnerabilities, vulnerability management, the answer is Amazon Inspector. Okay. It is a vulnerability management service that continuously scans workloads for software vulnerabilities and unintended network exploits. Okay. Fine, team. So I think these are the 10 questions that I had for the security domain, design secure architectures. So I hope this was helpful. So I will come back with the next video on reviewing 10 questions for the next domain, which is the design resilient architectures. So stay tuned for my next video. So thank you all, and I'll meet you all in my next video.